Each one of us has the ability to remember who we are and what it is we're supposed to do here, to understanding your divinity and help you understand what your mission is here on this earth and make sure that you fulfill it. I don't have baggage, Mikey. I had luggage, man. I went to prison. So I found somebody that really matched and was cool with my mission and my purpose and on board to do it as a partnership and to do it together. And when there's that love that exists, it gives you purpose. It drives you in the morning. The most dangerous species on the planet is a self-confident man. The most powerful species on the planet is a self-confident woman. And when you can match those two together in harmony and love, what you have is you have the most unstoppable force in the universe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am so excited for our guest today. This is Shane Baldwin. He is self-proclaimed best salesman on the planet. He's worked in
self-proclaimed.
Self-proclaimed. He's in real estate. He's worked on Wall Street. He's known as the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street.
Yes. And I go by many names. Listen, I was Sugar Shane pre-prison.
Yes.
But you don't want to be Sugar Shane in prison. So
no.
In prison, listen, in prison, if you look like you're a clean-cut guy and you have no tattoos, they definitely think you're there on a sex offense. And so you have to show them your paperwork. And when I would show them my paperwork, they would say, oh, securities fraud, white collar. I'd be like, yeah, they're like the Wolf of Wall Street. I'd be like, yeah, but I'm like the Mormon version. And so they started calling me the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street.
Guys, I am too excited for this interview. This is going to be so good. Shane, do you want to take a second, introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, like I said, Shane Baldwin. I have a crazy story. Born in 1980. Was adopted through LDS Social Services, had an amazing childhood, raised by an amazing mother and father, Dwight and Cindy Baldwin. Grew up super duper LDS.
Right.
Served a mission when I was 19 years old in South Africa for my church. And when I came home, I married the girl that had been writing me that whole time and started my first business with a couple of people called CleanFlix.
I love it. Some of you may have heard of CleanFlix. Super cool business. Love what Shane's been doing. Shane has some big goals that he's coming up with too, but today we kind of want to go over a little bit. He's got a book coming out that's kind of a message that he wants to share with the world. We want to get into that a little bit, get into his story a little bit, and kind of talk to you guys about how Shane has gotten into this lifestyle of commitment and pushing this message to help other people. And so we want to get into that, help you guys see how he's obsessed with his life and with his goals. So Shane, do you want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, and really the book comes around to where my philosophies derive from. When I was 12 years old, I don't know if any of you have played junior jazz, but when I was 12, my dad was my coach.
Awesome.
And they give you these tickets to the jazz games. And they're in the nosebleeds. And so we're way up there, and I'm 12 years old, and I look at my dad, and I said, Dad, how do we sit down on the front row? He said, well, son, we've got to make a lot of money. They're really expensive. I said, well, let's make a lot of money. And that night when we got home, my dad said, hey, you want to make a lot of money? I said, yeah, I want those front row seats. And he gave me two books. He gave me the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill that was written in 1937. And another book that was written around that exact same time called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And those two books became my philosophy for business and for life. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't eventually violate some of those very principles, but my book is based on those fundamental teachings.
Nice.
And my story is weaved into the book. It's called The Honest Lie. And I actually wrote the book at a time period, my wife, so I got arrested in 2015 by the state of Utah. I found myself in jail. My wife had told me that she was going to be divorcing me. I had felt like I was losing absolutely everything. And so I started talking to the other inmates, trying to figure out a way to kill myself. And I was asking all of the questions to make sure, like, hey, if I'm going to kill myself, I want to make sure it actually works. And many of the ideas were like, there's two tiers inside of jail. So there's an upstairs and a downstairs. So you can tear dive is what they call it, which means you jump off the upper tier on your head.
Oh my gosh.
But not a lot of people like die in that. They just get badly injured.
Super
so I'm
bad.
like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Then there's the way of hanging yourself in there, but you can't actually hang yourself. You gotta like kneel on the ground and hunch over and tie a sheet around you. And I'm like, dude, I'll stand up. Like I can't do that. And so all of the different ways, or cutting yourself with a razor, I'm like, listen, I don't think any of those will actually work. So then I started thinking about how could I get creative? And then I had an idea. I'm like, listen, I'm just not going to eat. I'm not going to eat. I'm going to go as long as I possibly can. No food, no water. And then when I'm so weak, I'm just going to kneel down and I'm going to pray and plead with God to stop my heart from beating. And so that was my plan. So I went several days, weeks, without eating, without drinking. And one night I was as weak as I could be. I got on my knees and I pled with God for, it must have been over an hour at night, laying on the concrete floor, crying to just stop my heart from beating. And I had a dream. And in this dream, a man came to me. And he was, I'll call him my guide. He came to me and he said, Shane, I'm here to offer you a deal. And I said, well, you know I like deals. I'm a deal guy. And it was kind of one of those Scrooge moments where he said, I'll let you go pick 3 different time periods, let you go back to that time period, restart your life from that moment, making a different life decision. Now, in 2007, I was working at Merrill Lynch. I was working with my father. I was making great money, but I had chosen to leave Merrill Lynch. And I said, let's go back to 2007. And this time I won't leave Merrill Lynch. And he showed me my life. And my life was amazing. Now I don't become a multi-gajillionaire, but I'm definitely a millionaire. I stay married to my wife. Now, I have 4 kids right now, but in this instance, I only had 3, which was concerning because I didn't have my youngest son, Cage. But he showed me my life, and my life turned out amazing. I rose up through the ranks of the church, all the way to a general authority. So everything's great in my life. And I turned to the guide and I said, well, what about, this looks pretty good. What about my kids? Well, my 3 kids, I have Jet, Gray, and London. They were all a mess. Whether it was addicted to drugs or just into trouble or just in a bad spot. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. Well, my life is great. Their life is not. So I don't want to do that. He said, okay, you got option number 2. I'm like, all right, option number 2. Let's go 2011. This is when I started making bad decisions in my business. So I had a company called Silverleaf where we ended up buying $800 million worth of bad debt secured by real estate all over the country. And in 2011, I started making some really bad choices, really bad decisions, being deceptive, manipulative. And I'm like, what if we go back to that time and I'm honest, I'm transparent, I'm straightforward with people? I said, I'll show you. In this instance, again, I only have my 3 kids. I end up divorcing my wife, marrying my assistant at the time, and I go on to become one of the Forbes 400 richest men in America. I'm like, okay, well, what's my relationship with God like? In the last one, like, I was solid. He's like, you have no relationship with God. You want nothing to do with God. I said, well, what about my kids? It's like, you also have no relationship with them. You're so caught up in everything that you got going on that you don't even care about them.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. So now I had one option left, and I'm racking my brain in this dream, trying to figure out which time period to go back to. And then the thought came to me, what does it look like if I just stay right here? And he showed me. He said, Shane, I'm glad you asked that.
Right.
And he said, you're going to be here for 5 years. He showed me all the lives I would impact during those 5 years. Whether it was teaching them about the gospel of Jesus Christ or just helping them develop greater self-confidence or teaching them the principles that are found in my book, just about success and mindset and being obsessed with the quest. But the life that I impacted the most was my own in that process. And if I would have gratitude during the suffering, it would give me tremendous power. Now, he also showed me I have 4 kids. And all my kids turn out amazing. And I said, how is that possible? I'm away for 5 years, yet they turn out amazing. He said, it's because they've been through some affliction. They've been through some suffering. They've been through some hard times. And those hard times are what make them successful and what make them strong.
Right.
He showed me that, again, I had my 4 kids. I get out, I find love again, and showed me exactly what I needed to do in 2028, and showed me exactly why I came down to this earth and what my purpose actually was. And if there's one fear, Mikey, that I've had, the one fear is that I would come down to this earth, I would forget what I was supposed to do here, I would return home and report back, and God would be like, well, you think you did a good job, but let me show you what you were supposed to do.
Right.
And then I'm like, dang it. And then I'm disappointed. And then I let down so many people. And so there's a phrase in the scriptures mentioned in the New Testament, and for those that check the Book of Mormon out, it's to go no more out. That's the phrase that really stuck out in my mind as I studied the scriptures. It's like, hey, do everything you're supposed to do in your earth life experience so that you go no more out. And my fear was, oh, I don't want to go out. I want to do what I needed to do. And in that moment, in that dream, I was shown everything that I needed to do.
Right.
And so I woke up from that dream. I called my attorney. I accepted a plea deal. And I got out 5 years later, 5 years and 2 months to be exact. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but Utah is one of the few states where it's called indeterminate sentencing, which means when you go to sentencing, they don't tell you exactly how long you're going to be there.
Really?
It's totally up to a board of pardons to decide. And this judge sentenced me to a 4 to 30, minimum of 4, maximum of 30 years. When I saw the board the first time, they came back and they gave me my rehearing for April of 2020. I got arrested in April of 2015, exactly 5 years to the date. Now, because of COVID, that date got pushed a few months later, but I got out June 30th of 2020, just like the dream said. Those 5 years were the greatest 5 years for my life. I think one of the challenges that we have being out here is we're so distracted.
So distracted.
On the phone all the time, everything's going on. You're worried about money and how you're going to pay for things and all this stuff, right?
Right.
In there, you don't worry about those kinds of things. In there, instead of relying on Google to help you, you rely on maybe your other self, or as we would call it, the spirit, right?
Right.
To teach us. And I can tell you, I found so many gems and things by studying the scriptures. I read 20 to 25 books a month. I studied every other religion under the sun. And my conclusion still today is there is more truth found in the faith that I was raised in than any other faith that I've studied. But it was having that foundation that helped me understand where many other faiths are coming from.
Totally.
And it's a combination of a lot of things that help me understand the doctrines that I grew up learning.
Well, and it's given you a huge opportunity to not just be able to be more, faith-filled in your faith, but to be able to bring other people of all views together.
100%. Like now, I one of my best friends, he's Jewish, but I read the Torah and I understand their culture at a different level, so he and I connect at a different level. And I love the Jewish traditions and the Jewish faith. But I studied it. I invested a lot of time in it. I love the book of Isaiah.
Right.
Like, I know you talk to people and you mention the word Isaiah and they're like, oh, that's just, you can't understand that.
Don't even want to look at it.
Yeah, and if I were Satan, that's exactly what I would plant in the minds of men, right? I wouldn't want them to read Isaiah. Isaiah is mentioned so much throughout the scriptures, and I have 400 pages on the book of Isaiah, and I understand Isaiah at a whole different level because of that time that I had in prison to really have the Spirit teach me rather than having anybody else try and teach me other than God teaching me in the Spirit.
Right. With those books, you said you were reading 15, 20 books a month. Were there any of those books that were like totally above the others that really have shaped your future?
I'm glad you asked this. There's the greatest book that nobody knows about that I found in prison. It was written in 1898 by a guy named Ralph Waldo Trine. Now, I would tell you, listen, if you're going to get this book, you gotta read another book prior to reading this book, otherwise you won't understand it.
Okay.
So you have to read the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, which was written, the manuscript was written in 1937. He supposedly had an interview with the devil. devil said, if you publish this, I'm going to ruin you and your posterity. It didn't get published until 2012. So read or listen to that book first. Once you're done with that, immediately go pick up Ralph Waldo Trine's book called In Tune with the Infinite. Okay. And In Tune with the Infinite was so powerful. In fact, I'm driving to St. George today, and I'm going to listen to In Tune with the Infinite. I listen to it a couple times a year. It is such a powerful book. And with the doctrines of our culture, when you listen to that book, it helps you understand how engaged the people are in the unseen world. Now, for some people, they're saying, well, what's the unseen world? Well, some people call it the spirit world.
Right.
But when you understand how actively engaged they are in helping us, and how by helping us, if we'll follow, listen, and do what they're prompting us to do, it helps them. And when you understand that principle, that it's more than just you, like if you'll tune in to the unseen world, they can help you significantly. And that's how you use the secret or manifestation or these things that people talk about, right. But they don't talk about how to utilize those that have come before us and that are engaged in our lives in helping us fulfill our mission or our purpose or accomplish different things.
That is so crazy. So when they read not just one of these books, but both of them together, how's it going to change them from who they are to who are they going to become by reading those together?
Yeah, so when you look at what Napoleon Hill's talking about, I think most people are trapped in, it's a popular thing right now to call it the matrix.
Huge.
What is referred to by Napoleon Hill is drifters. So Satan says, listen, I got 98% of the population drifting, which means they don't have purpose. They're just going through the motions. They wake up, they go to work, they come home, and they rinse and repeat. They're not asking real questions. They're not really trying to help themselves or help other humans. They're just kind of going through the motions and they're drifting.
Right.
The goal is to snap yourself out of this drifting process, recognize that you are down here for a specific reason and purpose, and then figure out how to tap into all the resources available to help you understand exactly who you are and exactly what you're doing. I'll ask you a question, right?
Yeah.
If I offered you $5 million, be deposited in your bank account tomorrow, guaranteed, $5 million bucks. But in exchange for that, I want all of your memories. You're not going to remember your brother who I met. You're not going to remember your parents. You're not going to remember anything about your life.
Right.
For $5 million, would you take that deal?
Not in a million years.
You would, right?
Never.
But guess what? Each one of us did.
Right.
But we didn't do it for $5 million. We did it for these physical bodies. We literally have no recollection who we are before we came here, what our purpose is. We just showed up here. But each one of us has the ability to remember who we are and what it is we're supposed to do here if we'll take the time. And so by reading those two books, ultimately it will wake you up to understanding your divinity and help you understand what your mission is here on this earth and make sure that you fulfill it.
Well, and guys, I just want to point out, like, look at Shane and look at where he's going in life. Like, everything he does is based on a connection with a higher power. It's based on a connection with God. And the thing is, what brought that on was learning who he is, where he comes from, and how to actually work with that divinity inside him to connect with his higher power, with his Father, follow that direction. And I mean, guys, he's pulled off stuff that you wouldn't believe, the stuff people would call miracles, but it's really just learning to work with divinity.
100%. And I think part of the secret sauce is taking the focus off of yourself
100%.
and putting it on others.
Why is that so crucial?
I think the more you focus on how can I help somebody else, you end up helping yourself. It's really a weird thing, but the more focus you put on just helping yourself, the harder life becomes.
Right.
And so we don't realize this, but there are people that are literally put in our path all the time. And it's divine intervention.
Right.
And we don't recognize it because we're so caught up either looking at our phone or worrying about whatever we got going on that we miss these very opportunities that many of us are actually praying for. Right. So we're saying God doesn't answer our prayers, and God is saying, you don't know how many times I put somebody in your path and you just didn't take the action.
Well, guys, this is where it's like, it is so crucial. I'm so glad we got to this. This is gonna be one of my favorite podcasts for this reason right here. The thing is, it's like when you take the attention off of you, two things happen. One is you become very, very open-minded, and two, you're not gonna stop at a point which you would normally stop at because it reflects poorly on you. Whenever you make a plan, especially with divinity, you're gonna notice that you make a plan, a very solid plan, and it's adapted to your strengths. So the thing is, again, you guys have heard me say, if you're 98% capable, God will fill in the other 2% as long as you plan it out with him. But you got to recognize that when you're putting in your 98%, usually the plan doesn't go quite as you planned. Now, if you get yourself out of the way, you won't care that the plan didn't go how you planned it. But if it doesn't, sometimes so many of you get choked up and you stop because you're going, oh no, it didn't go the way I said it was gonna, and so I look bad, so I'm just gonna stop. Or I'm gonna continue down the path that I thought was better, and you never get there. In reality, when you actually are willing to actually get yourself out of the way, one, you'll be super open to a fluid plan, which with the spirit world working around us and so many promptings and people being put in our paths, it's like you have to be fluid. You have to be fluid, and you have to be open, and you have to be, frankly, in the right mindset. You have to be looking for
Very
it.
true.
And if you're not, you're going to miss it. And the thing is, half the time it's like, you don't even know you're missing it. And it's right in front of you. Usually the answer is right there, and it is already there. And that's where you got the idea in the first place. And you got to be willing, number two, this is the other thing, because if you don't get yourself out of the way, your limiting beliefs about your perception, about your identity will hold you back. Because God has such bigger things planned for you. And if you're not willing to get yourself out of the way and say, okay, I get that you have a bigger vision for me than I did, then you're not going to be able to reach that potential that he knows you're capable of if you work with him.
It's very true. It's very true.
Big.
Yeah.
So Shane, you got huge stuff going. That is so awesome. I love that you mentioned those. Guys, go read the books. Let's start with those. Start with should they start with the two books that first influenced your mantra in life?
If you haven't read How to Win Friends and Influence People and Think and Grow Rich, I give all of so I run a door-to-door company. I give all of my sales reps the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, then Think and Grow Rich, then Outwitting the Devil, and then I give them my book, which is called The Honest Lie, How to Navigate the Matrix, and then I'll give them In Tune with the Infinite. If they can make it through that gauntlet of books,
yeah.
And I believe there's power in the page. I'm not a guy. Now, listening to books is also amazing, but you pick up so much more when you sit down with a book and you're seeing those words on that physical page. Now, you got to remember this about that page. That page is alive. It's a living, breathing thing. Totally. It's like this piece of wood right here. Like it literally came from trees,
right?
Living, breathing things. And so there's some kind of unique magical power in the page. And I tell people that all the time, like, hey, I know there are easier ways, maybe through a Kindle or through just listening to it. But when we're talking about these books and even the scriptures,
I was about to say that.
like listen, if I were Satan and I knew that there was power in that page, I would try to make that page be technology, which was created by man, and it loses some of its flavor. It loses some of its spirit. And so I read my scriptures and mark it up with a pencil. And that's how I study the scriptures, because I understand that there is value and power in the page.
Right. That is so big. Well, and it floods into your life. It's like, are you actually like producing something that's real? Something that came from God? Something, and I'm not saying that like your tablet didn't, but I'm pointing out that it's like when there's a lot of effort that's put in and you kind of do it in the way that he supports and tells you to, you're going to see a big impact. And so it's like, make sure that you're not just following what he said to do, but how he said to do it. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make, I guess.
For sure.
It's big stuff. Guys, this is already, if you guys are listening to this, let me just point out, Shane has not actually agreed to be on many podcasts. A lot of people have actually invited him and he's declined many of them. So if you're listening to this, there's a reason, and you probably already recognized it.
100%. Listen, and it was for me when I got out of prison. I had an offer for a book and a movie deal, and I'm at the point in my life where I recognize I don't make the best decisions. In fact, the decisions I made ultimately led me to prison, right?
Right.
So at this point, I just rely on a higher power to make big decisions. Now, I don't ask the higher power if I should have macaroni and cheese or mashed potatoes, but I do when it comes to a big decision. I definitely take the time to ponder and think and meditate and then ask God if it's what I should do. And so when I got out, I had these offers and these opportunities, and I was told to wait till 2023 to focus on my 4 kids and rebuilding my relationship with them. I mean, my oldest son, Jet, he's 18 years old. I work with him now. He went out this summer. Kid made $158,000 right out of high school.
Goodness, that's a proud dad.
And he won our 3-week competition. We call it the championship. And he won a $120,000 BMW i8 Roadster at 18 years old. Now,
What?
how I get that kid on a mission at this point, that's my next challenge. But he's got a super cute girlfriend, tons of confidence. And for me, it's like everything that I was shown in that dream where my kids turn out amazing is happening.
Right.
And my relationship with my kids has never been better. And so I really focused on that the last 2.5 years, and then building a business that was externally focused. When real estate was my sole business,
Right.
I lost my soul. And so while I love real estate and I like investing in real estate and doing real estate deals, that can't be my sole focus, because it's such an internally focused business, right? There's nothing wrong with it, but for me, I needed a business that was externally focused. And that's where the door-to-door business came in. At De Novo, I was able to really focus on these young men and these young women that are needing a summer job, a summer opportunity. They wanted to grow, and I mentor a lot of our managers and our leaders, and I love it because it keeps me focused on them rather than me only focused on myself.
Right.
And in prison, that was a big deal for me. In prison, I got a degree in psychology, and I would spend somewhere around 4 or 5 hours a day just sitting with the inmates I was there with, understanding their situation, understanding what they're trying to accomplish and how I can help them. And I've been fortunate to be involved with many people's recovery as it revolves around their addictions. And it's just, for me, there are 2 kinds of money, Mikey. There's the kind of money that we exchange.
Okay.
And then there's the kind of money when you get that text message from that person that said, Shane, because of what you taught me, I literally haven't had a sip of alcohol or done a drug, and I have peace and happiness in my life. And that's money. That's the kind of money I'm really after right now with my mission, is that kind of money.
Right.
Because that kind of money we actually get to take with us. The money that I was so focused on before prison, we don't take any of that with us. But impacting somebody's life, changing somebody's life,
Right.
that money lasts for eternity.
Well, my question is this, because I love this, and I think the thing is, so many of those guys, they landed in prison, and it was such a great thing that you got to work with them. It's got their life on a new trajectory where they're not, quote unquote, wasting any more time. For people who, might feel like they're kind of, they're figuring out that they might be stuck in the matrix, and they're kind of just trying to find the direction. I mean, what's the best way for them to not waste any more time?
Yeah, I think there's a couple components to this, right? I have noticed that people who take their health serious, remember, we gave up everything to have this physical body, right? We literally gave up everything for this physical body.
Right.
And I don't think if we treat it poorly, God's super happy with us.
I totally agree.
He expects us to treat it with reverence, and we should. We gave up everything for this body. So the first thing that I tell people, listen, if you want to get out of the matrix, if you want to stop drifting, it starts by watching what you eat. It starts by moving your body. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go join the CrossFit gym and get all sore, but that means go spend 30 or 45 minutes in your day walking.
Get started with baby steps, basics.
Yes, so start there, and the more you do that, the more you start to tune into your body, the more you start to tune into your mind, and the more you start to think more clearly, you make better decisions, and ultimately you're just more in tune with what I call your other self. So in my book, I talk about this. I talk about we're made up of really 2 people. There's the person you see in the mirror, and then there's the person that is your soul, that is your spirit, that knows everything about what you're supposed to do. And the more you tune into that person, the more you'll get out of that matrix, the more you'll make better decisions, the more you'll feel more fulfilled in your purpose.
This is the coolest stuff, guys. Guys, that is a perfect answer. I think I would go right alongside with it. I think the thing is, when you see people that I've made most of my really good business connections at the gym. You guys would not believe this, but it's just like these people take care of their physical side, and so eventually they get to the point where they go, I can only lift so many weights in a day. I need to learn how to maybe work through my emotions in other ways. They get into meditation, they get into other things, breathing exercises, cold showers, you name it. They get into that mental side, and then they start to realize all this self-awareness. They go, I keep messing up here, or this thing keeps happening. Why? And they get into it, and I think ultimately they land exactly where Shane just said, which is they land at that little thing inside of them that is them, which I call it my little I am. And it's like, the thing is, you guys wouldn't believe when you get to know yourself on that level and you look that deep, how suddenly it's like you realize the power of your words. You hear all these people talking about manifesting things and mirror devotionals or like affirmations, and it's like you wonder, like, why is the word so important, or why is visualizing so important? And it's like when you can take your identity and wrap it around a vision, and then not just speak the words, but put power behind them by having it come directly from your little I am, suddenly your words have power. And it's like it will create action, it will create so much, because suddenly, like Ed Milet says, you become an evangelist for the cause. It's something you believe because you are it. And as soon as you add that into your mission, you would not believe how many people will rally around you, what opportunities show up, and how you're just suddenly guided, and how eventually, actually, it's so funny, you actually hear your own words and you have new realizations about it.
100%. Like you start saying things and you're like, man, I got to write that down. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
And what you realize is that's your other self. Your other self has infinite intelligence, and it's tapping into that. It's tuning into that. And so once you get your physical being right, the other way to really tune in is to start. I've found that the fastest way to dig yourself out of your hole is to help somebody out of theirs. And it doesn't have to be crazy big service things. Like literally, if we'll just hold the door open for somebody and ask them how their day's going, a stranger, you'll be amazed at what happens by just doing small little things to serve the people that you come in contact with. Now, you said something, Mikey, that is really, really important, and that is self-awareness. Like being aware of everything that's going on around you. And if you're at the gym and you feel like you should go talk to that person, you must go talk to that person.
Must.
You have to figure out, are you there to help them? Are they there to help you? Or what is the connection there? And it's awkward sometimes, but when you tell somebody, hey man, I just felt like I needed to come and talk to you. What's your name? That's it.
You're not going to do it also, guys, unless you have that mindset that there is this higher power, this greater purpose, this destiny, this journey that you're on, and with this spirit world helping you out. When you can get out of what you think is the matrix, or what you're seeing around you, and you're just going, it's just this. No, it's a lot more. You got to follow it. You have to.
Yeah, you have to. And the more you follow that, and sometimes you'll be prompted to do something and you'll say, man, that didn't really yield anything. And sometimes it's just testing. Hey, you listening? And the more you act on those promptings, the more power you'll get, the more people, they'll be like, listen, my guy's not listening, and you'll get more people helping you in that unseen world, because they're like, hey, this guy's like making moves. Right. He's taking action. I want to be a part of what he's got going on.
This is true. It builds momentum.
100%.
I've seen some guys, especially Shane. Shane's a great example of this, but he is fully committed to working with, divinity. And it's like, the more he does that, the more I just see him plowing ahead, and all these things are just aligning for him. But guys, like, take it seriously, because the thing is this. I had this funny experience where I was at the gym, and this was months ago, but it was so funny to me because I was just praying. I was trying to just communicate with God, and I was sitting there and I was like, God, like, I'd love to have some sort of a partner, a companion. Could you help me connect with someone that, would make a good, spouse? And it was so funny. I was just looking around in the gym and I was like, is that her? And I got the answer. It was like, yes. And I was like, I looked at another time and I was like, no, it's not. And he's like, see, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. And I was like, it was just so funny to me.
So did you approach her or no?
No, not at all. Because the thing was, I realized that I wasn't being sincere in my due diligence and whatnot. I was like, I need to actually anyway, for me, I was like, I knew that I wasn't taking it seriously at that moment. And then I was just kind of being like, if you want to tell me, I'm cool with it. Instead of being like, I'm committed if you tell me.
Yeah.
And he was just teaching me that lesson that it's like, if you're really going to do this, you got to really be behind it.
So
maybe that was her.
Yeah. One of the things I did while I was in prison, I knew that it was important for me to have the right companion.
Yes.
I knew that was like vital. And I knew.
Why vital?
Because it, like, okay.
People don't get this nowadays.
Yeah.
They're all flimsy and they don't want to be in relationships.
So women tap into this, the feeling side and the emotional side of the equation that men typically don't. And
beautiful.
You need that other person as you're making decisions to feel into it. And it's just like, I tell people this all the time. I say that the most dangerous species on the planet is a self-confident man. The most powerful species on the planet is a self-confident woman. And when you can match those two together in harmony and love, what you have is you have the most unstoppable force in the universe. And
listen to that again. Go back. Listen to it one more time.
Yeah. It's
unstoppable, guys.
And so, but you got to find the right person, right?
Correct.
And that's really important. So then the question is, well, geez, how do I do that? Especially with all of these apps and social media, like it's so easy to be like, oh, well, maybe I want that. Well, maybe I want that. And maybe what we need to do is just close that out for a second. Sit down with a pencil and a paper and start listing out what the perfect person for you would be. And that's what I did in prison. I literally listed out everything that I wanted in my future companion.
Yeah.
And some of the things were completely unrealistic for a guy who's in prison. Listen, I wanted somebody that was going to be around my same age. I was born in 1980. I wanted somebody who didn't already have any children. I wanted somebody who was of the same faith, and I wanted somebody who had served a mission. A girl that had served a mission in the late 90s, early 2000s, doesn't have any kids, is still single, and oh, by the way, she had to be beautiful. I had to be attracted to her. Right? I'm listing out all these things. I'm like, she's got to come from a well-to-do family. She's got to come from a family that's strong in the faith. Like, I'm listing out all of these things that would be completely unrealistic.
Right.
I get out. I can't get on my freaking Facebook account because I can't remember my password. So I have to, and when that happens, I don't force the issue. I'm like, okay, clearly the universe wants me to just create a new account. So I created a new account and I start inviting friends. And as you invite friends, it says, oh, here's a suggestion of other people you should invite. So I invite one of my friends. He used to be my brother-in-law. We had married sisters. His name's John Adams. I invite him to be my friend. And then I get the suggestion, and there's his sister, born in 1980, beautiful. And I invite her to be my friend. And I look at her profile and I realize she doesn't have any kids.
Oh my gosh.
She served a mission. She has a master's degree and she's single. And then I realized we have this tool. They call it the DM machine, I think it's called, the direct message machine. And I'm like, I can literally send her a message.
Yeah.
So I send a message right then and there. I've been out of prison for like 2 weeks. I send her a message and she responds right away.
Oh my gosh.
And we start this conversation and then it moves into the text message and then she accidentally FaceTimes me. And we have a FaceTime.
Yes, Shane.
And then the next day, she reaches out to me. She says, hey, I'd like to go on a hike. I'm like, listen, I don't even have a driver's license at this point. I have to get my driver's license renewed, but I got no shame. I just got out of prison.
Right.
And I'm like, cool, we can go do that, but you're going to have to come pick me up. I live in my parents' house, by the way. I just got out of prison. I have no job. I have no driver's license, but I don't care. I'm making moves. And sure enough, she comes over. We go on a hike. We hang out that day, then the next day we hang out, and then I get my driver's license on that Friday. My mom lets me borrow her Lexus, and I take her out to dinner. And we kissed for the first time, and when we kissed, she started to cry, and I stopped. I said, are you okay? Am I that bad? And she says, no, but you're exactly who I've been waiting for.
You are kidding me.
I'm not kidding you, and I ended up marrying her. We got engaged 5 weeks later, and we've been married ever since. Her name's Angie Adams. But I'm telling you, if you're intentional and you write down exactly in pencil, this is really important, in pencil. Don't use a pen, don't write it on your freaking phone, like use a pencil, and be specific. And then when you see somebody that matches that, boom, take action, DM him, go after him. It may or may not be that person. You got to figure it out.
Right.
But you got to take the action, and if you'll be obsessed with finding that person, and then once you're obsessed, what happens is you take massive action. You just literally take action every day, and you're totally aware.
Right.
And so you see somebody who looks like that, and boom, you take action. And that was the case for me. And I knew in order to do what I needed to do, I needed a companion,
right,
that was compatible with me, right? And so you got to make sure that they align with your values, and then you really got to trust at that point as you get to know the person. Hey, is this the person for me? And certainly she is the person for me. She's amazing.
This is blowing my mind. So guys, okay, well, this is anyway.
And by the way, her brother John, we were brother-in-laws.
Yeah.
My wife divorces me. His wife actually died while I was in prison.
No way.
And now we're brother-in-laws again. The dude can't shake me. He can't get rid of me.
You're a magnet. Okay, the thing is, the reason this is so crazy and it's timely for me, I'm glad you're my audience, listen. I have a mentor that told me to do this exact same thing. I wrote out a list. How many attributes did yours have?
I'd have to go back to my list. There's a lot that I was looking for.
I wrote out 47 that I was like, I don't want to say they're deal breakers, but many of them were like very high priority. And the thing was, for the last year, basically, I haven't really been dating. I've just been working, partially because I kind of felt a divine feeling that it was like, it wasn't a big deal. I needed to just back up, follow God. You know, I felt like I was being prompted towards one person, and then it was like, hey, just give it time, back it up. Didn't turn into anything. And so more recently, just started dating again. I made a thing where every morning I was reading my list of attributes.
Perfect.
Because I wanted it fresh top of mind, and I wanted to recognize it when I see it, guys. Because the thing is, you'll notice as soon as you make this list, and you can do this for business partners, for clients, for relationships. But the thing is, when you start doing this, you start to realize what you actually care about. Because you might start dating somebody and be like, oh shoot, I actually want to add that to my list because that's actually important to me. Or you might realize, hey, that one actually isn't as big as I thought it was. You'll refine this list, and as soon as you got it, guys, it's bizarre. Same thing. I shouldn't even say this. Someone's gonna listen to this and they're gonna get the message out. But I'm in the middle of kind of going out with somebody that I'm like, it's seeming extremely similar to what you're saying, because I decided I was gonna date again. Not to derail this whole conversation because you guys would rather listen to Shane, but
no, this is important.
I got into it, and I was talking with my buddy, and I was like, hey, I feel like we need to start, going out with girls again. He's been going out with girls this whole time. He's like, you need to start going out with girls again. And so I went through my entire Instagram, and I only found one person that I was like, because I was like, I want to start fresh. Found one person, girl, haven't even, ever talked to her. I followed her on Instagram because I served a mission in Italy, in Rome. When I got back, everybody kept sending me all these missionaries that were getting called to Italy. And I was like, even if they were in Milan, they're like, look, they're going to your mission. And I was like, that's not my mission, but thanks. Like, found this beautiful blonde lady that I followed her. And that was like 5 years ago. She's been back 3 years. I asked my buddy, I was told my buddy, I was like, there's only one girl on Instagram that I don't know that I could start with fresh that, I'd be very interested in taking her out. And so I looked at our common followers, found just one guy I knew. And I thought this was weird, but I was like, hey, like, how do you know this girl? And he was like, well, she kind of dated my brother in high school. And I was like, okay, is she crazy? And he was like, no, like, just didn't work out. And I was like, can you set it up? And he was like, yeah, I'll see. Next day, he sends me her number and says, hey, she's expecting a call. I text her. I say, hey, you want to get on a call tonight? And she's like, yeah. And so we had a 2-hour phone call. Went great. And I was like, this is so cool. Went on my first date with her. I came home and I just started checking boxes off that attributes list. And I was like, it may turn out that we're not a fit. It may turn out whatever. But guys, this thing works. And I think it's super smart that Shane was pointing out, write it in pencil. Mine's electronic, but I think, honestly, if I'd written it in pencil and I think writing it just sticks in your brain so much better.
Well, the pencil, listen, I'm the only human that teaches us. There's power in the pencil. That pencil used to be a tree, a living, breathing thing. In fact, we can't live on this planet without those trees.
Right.
And that pencil is fulfilling the final measure of its creation. And when that pencil meets that paper, which also comes from trees, it's like making love with the universe.
Yeah.
And it communicates with the universe very, very well. And so I write all my goals, anything that's important. I journal always in pencil. And the great thing is, if I mess up, I can erase it. And so the pencil's amazing. That's why they gave us number 2 pencils. Think of all the way back in elementary school, and you would go and sharpen those suckers. So I carry a pencil and paper with me everywhere I go.
There's power in the pencil.
Power in the pencil.
And there's power in these attribute lists. So guys, really get detailed. Whatever heaven's telling you, especially if you know, and I think most of you do, there is so much power. There's an unstoppable force, and that is a union with a man and a woman that they can really, with their own special attributes that they bring together, become an unstoppable force.
100%. Like it's incredible. It really is. I've never had such harmony in my relationships that I do with this girl, because I was way more intentional in what I was looking for. Because I'm a little older, and listen, I'm like, I don't have baggage, Mikey. I had luggage, man. I went to prison. So I the things that I was asking for, it's like I just can't fit any more baggage in my luggage. It's pretty packed right now. So I found somebody that really matched and was totally cool with my mission and my purpose, and on board to do it as a partnership and to do it together. And so it's very, very powerful. And the truth is, when there's that love that exists, like, it gives you purpose. It drives you in the morning. It wakes you up because you know, hey, somebody else is relying on me here.
Right.
And this somebody else is also like supporting me, and I'm supporting her in her journey. And it's just a really powerful thing.
So we're on the topic. How does it, as a man, we can speak to what we think about women, but we're men, and I think a lot of our audience is male, and I think they want to know, they want to connect with how does it shape you when you actually take on the responsibility of a full-time relationship as a man?
Yeah, I think it becomes like your goals become different. Like, there's this thing they call it the muse. Mm-hmm. And when you have a real muse, that muse motivates you.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I'm doing this. I got to show her. It's like I don't know, 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, the man would be like, okay, like, I got to go and hunt and bring home some food so that my family can eat. Like, they're relying on the man to go and do that. Now, the man's also relying on the wife to take care of the kids and have everything like taken care of, while that man's out there like busting his butt to go and feed his family. And so it puts on a different level of motivation when you have somebody else and you have that family, especially when you add kids to that equation, because now you got to provide for even more people, and even more people are relying on you to be the leader, to be the one that steps up, to be the one that shows the way and paves the way. And then they're there to be kind of your emotional support, which you need, because us men have a hard time really tuning into our emotions. It took me going through prison to figure out that, hey, it's totally cool to cry. It's totally cool to have empathy. And I don't want anybody to go to prison and having to learn that, but there's a lot we can learn from these women about tuning into our emotions.
I love that. Well, and I just want to point out that it's like, you've been married twice.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, I want you guys to hear this, when you get that motivation the first time, does it last forever? Or when you got divorced, does it go away and then it comes back when you get another relationship? Kind of that superpower of being in a relationship as a man?
I would say what happens inside of a relationship is if you don't manage that relationship appropriately, which was the case for me in my first relationship, I didn't include my first wife in my goals, in my purpose, in what I was doing. And so while she was there, and while we had kids, and while we were just checking boxes, we weren't on the same wavelength. We weren't on the same page, and that's my fault. We weren't praying together intently. We were just kind of living each our separate lives. And what happened, the motivation became about me, and I'm doing it for me, and I wasn't doing it for anybody else, because we were on two different wavelengths, two different pages. Right. And it took getting divorced for me to realize the mistakes that I made by not including my first spouse in with my intentions, in with my goals, and making sure that my goals aligned with her goals, and that I was there to support her as much as she was there to support me.
Huge.
And so, when I got out of prison, it was like, okay, I got to do a better job of including my spouse in everything that I'm doing and making sure that I'm checking in with her, because she's like, before I do business with somebody, I'll typically say, if it's going to be a long-term business relationship, I'll typically say, hey, let's do dinner, and I'll have my wife check on what her emotional response is, because for me, I'm more of like, if I think it makes sense, I just think, if I think it makes sense, I'm going to do this deal. Well, these women have this ability to connect emotionally and to go, yeah, I get a different emotional vibe from this person. I think maybe you can be friends with them, but doing business with them maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So having her help me, and my first wife could have done the same thing. I just didn't include her in it. I didn't think I needed to.
Right.
And I couldn't have been more wrong.
Well, and that's the thing. I think a lot of you guys out there, you think you're like, if I include them, they'll just kind of get in the way. It might be a problem, and I'll, even though I get this quote unquote extra power, in my marriage, it's like that wouldn't necessarily multiply it. And it sounds like the more that you include them and their goals as well into your daily, you might even get more power because you're really on the same page now.
100%. They know what you're doing. They know who you're working with and where you're going, and they can be involved in that and also continue to support you in that.
Huge. Okay, so a lot of people out there, they're sitting here and they're going, okay, I've heard about some good books. I need to find myself. I need to become self-aware, go get physical, figure out who I am, and then I need to get this person. So at this point, do they know their purpose?
You would hope, because the real thing is this, like, as you're going on this journey, then you got to start being intentional when you're having conversations with your higher power. And I think too many times we're not intentional. We're just going through the motions. We're just like, and we're not being intentional.
Right.
And I tell people this all the time. It's time you have some frank talk. Some frank talk with yourself and some frank talk with God. And that means you're like, hey man, like, I'm down here. I'm searching. I'm trying. I'm doing all of these things. But I need you to inspire my mind. I need you to guide me to exactly what my purpose is here, because I want to make sure that I fulfill that. Now, one of the keys, and this is what I tell people all the time, life's like a video game, right? And imagine you had all these points that you had accumulated before you came down to this earth, and you could use them on certain things. Awesome. You could use them to decide which time period you were going to be born into. You could use them to decide which country you were going to be born in. You could decide which state. Depending on how many points you have, you can get really specific in how you spend your points. And you spend your points because you're like, I got to remember. And I'm going to spend my points because this is going to give me the most likely chance to remember who I am. And then we get down here, and then we decide that, oh, I was born into a home that was of this faith. And then we decide that we think we know better, and we're going to do something totally different. And I think what we have to get back to is we have to say, okay, why, if it's true, and if I did choose this to help me remember, then I need to do more of that. I need to be better at that. I have my Jewish friend who he loves the Book of Mormon, thinks it's amazing. And he said, Shane, should I join your church? I said, unless God tells you to do it, I wouldn't do anything. I'd be the best Jew you could possibly be. But if you go to God and God says, yes, do this, then absolutely you should do it. But for right now, these were the circumstances that you chose, and just be the best at that until God tells you to really do something different.
Right.
And too many times we decide that we need to do something different. Oh, that this isn't for us, when in reality, we chose that before we even came here.
Crazy. So for people who are listening to this, then maybe they're less familiar with actually getting some sort of guidance from God. For you, when you're talking with your friend, he says, hey, you say, hey, unless he tells you, how do you think most people would know that God's telling them to do something?
I mean, there's a couple of things. Oftentimes we think the voice in our head is our voice, and I'm telling you, it's not. Sometimes the music that's playing on the radio and you have it on shuffle is actually, if you listen to the words, God is speaking to you. Sometimes it's through these feelings that we have, these undeniable feelings, like this is exactly what I need to do, right? And it's really tuning into those feelings.
You're putting your hand on here.
Yeah,
you're saying undeniable.
Like you just know, hey, I need to do this. So you can feel it. You can definitely hear it.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. I think every single person has the right to personal revelation. And you can receive that revelation through a variety of different ways. It can be through dreams, it can be through an angel coming to you, it can be through music, it can be through another person that comes to you, it can be through what I call synchronicities. You start seeing things line up, and because you're aware, you're like, okay, I see the universe is definitely pointing me in this path. But you just have to be aware, and you have to be sincere in your quest.
And you got to have that faith, guys, because it's not going to go the way you plan. So don't think that when it goes the way you didn't plan or the way you thought about it the first time, that suddenly you're off the path.
It's totally true. Listen, I wear 2 bracelets here. This one was made in prison out of garbage bags, and then they would melt the inside of a colored pencil, and it says faith. And then you can see this one. This was what I had before prison, and it says faith.
Huh.
And faith is so important. And listen, when I went to prison, I thought, how could this include anything to do with what God's been telling me I need to do? How is prison a part of that? And then you start realizing that everything that's happening to you is happening for you. And the universe is always conspiring in your favor, no matter what it is. And so you should be grateful for whatever you're experiencing. And then when you do that, then you start manifesting things. Then you start understanding the secret, because you're like suffering and you're grateful for it because you know it's for your good. And then God's like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. I sent you down here not just to have all the pleasures of life. I sent you down so that you could feel and experience all of it.
Yeah.
And appreciate all of it, because how can we know pleasure if we don't know pain, right? So you have to understand the opposite of all things, and you should embrace all of it to experience all of it, to get to the point to where you just experience the most important parts of it.
That is so crazy. You guys, you might have heard the quote. I love that one where it says, like, the man asked life, like, why are you so hard? And he's like, nobody appreciates anything that's just given to them. And it's like, if you guys are going through something hard, or, I mean, let's be real, going to prison is probably the last thing on any of your list that you're like,
don't do it.
Yeah, you're sitting there going, this makes sense. Yeah, like, I mean, when you're going through something hard, you're already sitting there going, there's no way God planned this, right? Well, maybe he did. It's like, prison's probably the last one you'd want to accept as, yeah, this is God's will. But the fact that it's happening for you, not just to you, takes you out of being a victim, puts you in power.
Yes.
And you can actually now get something out of it. And not just that, Shane didn't just get something for him. He went in and he had experiences where he got to help so many people.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that has been one of the pinnacles of my spiritual experiences, was in prison, where I was humble. I was exactly where God needed me to be. I think when we think about even the Savior Jesus Christ, where did he go after he was crucified? He went to the spirits in prison. And there's real power being in a prison, that you can help so many people. And in the process of helping people, it helps you.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm so grateful for the inmates that were there, that allowed me to be there to help them, because in truth it helped me.
That's crazy. So people take this journey that we've talked about on this podcast. They finally figure out their purpose, and they've figured out who they are and how to talk with God. And now they are good to just go on their journey and basically follow him. How do we help each other, I guess, in that sense? If I've got my path and you've got your path, we're just following God. And
yeah, I think it's always important to understand where somebody else is going.
Yeah.
So you can figure out how you can assist them, and they need to understand where you're going so you can assist them. And
I think your book, and I mean, we're not, this podcast was not made for the purpose of promoting the book, but guys, I'm just pointing out, Shane's taken his experience and he's written it down for the purpose of helping other people find the path, to find that guidance.
Yeah, and listen, this is the real truth. Everybody's waiting for Jesus to come.
Yeah.
But the truth is, Jesus is actually waiting for us. And that's why he doesn't know when he's coming, is because he doesn't know when we're going to get our acts together, when we're going to get serious about asking real questions, when we're going to get serious about finding our purpose, when we're going to get serious about really following him Once we do that, then it'll be time. And until we do that, who knows?
Yeah. Shane, I have another question. I'm curious, when you got out of prison, what was kind of the sensation? What was the
Man,
emotion?
it was, I remember it was COVID, and so they drove us, they dropped us off. I had this garbage bag filled with my stuff that I had accumulated through the 5 years in prison. They dropped me off in a parking lot. And I remember looking around the parking lot, and I was looking for my mother and my father. And I remember having the thought that my guess is when we die, we have our bag of stuff of all the things that we acquired on this earth life, but the first thing we're looking for is our loved ones. And then they find us, and then you embrace them, and then they take you home. And you're just so grateful. I remember just sitting in the back of the car being so grateful to sit on this heated seat and being grateful for these very simple things that we take for granted that I didn't have in prison. And for me, I wrote down that night that I always want to maintain what I call prison perspective. That I look at every situation that I'm in, and even there have been times where it's like I lived in an apartment complex when I first got out, and I didn't have a garage, and I remember having to go scrape the ice off of my windshield, and for a brief moment I started complaining that I was scraping my windshield of my Porsche. And I thought, what are you doing? Like, you're not in prison. You have a Porsche and you just got to wipe the snow off. It's not that bad. And so I catch myself in moments just making sure that I always maintain a level of gratitude and that prison perspective as I go throughout my day.
Prison perspective, I love that. Well, and that brings up another question. I'm curious, is there any situations out here in life that you think are worse than somebody being in prison?
Yeah, I think there's so many people that are trapped inside of their own prison. And it doesn't take, like when I was in prison, I found peace and joy and comfort and happiness and all sorts of things behind, those gates and those walls and those barbed wire fences. But so many of us are living a life that is prison, and we're in this state of negativity and complaining, and to me that's way worse than being in the physical prison, is being in the mental prison.
Right.
And just kind of going through the motions. And so
regular prison could be better.
Oftentimes it is, because at least it wakes you up. At least it causes you to start thinking.
You sound like you had the most productive 5 years ever.
Yeah, I got a degree in psychology. I mean, I
Books,
wrote a book. I read a ton of books. Like, I learned more. I learned more about people,
right,
and what they're dealing with, and how to understand where they're coming from. So the most important gift prison gave me was empathy. And I have more empathy for what people are going through, and I have a greater understanding of why people may make certain decisions, because you always say to yourself, I can't believe that somebody would go and do that. Well, go sit down with them for a few hours and hear their story and hear what they've been through. And then you might say, oh, geez, if I went through all of that too, maybe I would have made that mistake as well.
It's like real empathy.
Yeah.
So many people out here, they want to have that like showy empathy where they're like, oh, I understand. And you're like, yeah, it's a very superficial, very small problem, like very daily kind of thing you're going through here. Yeah, I get you understand it, but like try to understand somebody who their whole life got thrown around.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, they were raised a certain way. I get it why some people are in gangs. I get it why some people are addicted to meth and heroin when you look at, how they were raised or who their parents are or where they grew up, and you start having empathy and going, geez, number one, my life really isn't that bad. And number two, it's like, man, how can I help you, break that path that you've been on? How can I be there for you to provide you a better way?
Right. Okay, man, this is crazy, guys, and this is phenomenal. And if we can get him back, we'll get him back. But I want to ask Shane really quick. I mean, first thing, anything else that you wanted to mention that's just top of mind?
No, I mean, it's been awesome. I appreciate you having me on. I've turned down probably, I think I told you, 70 or so podcasts over the last couple of years, and that voice in my head said I could go ahead and open my big mouth come 2023, and here we are. It's 2023, and I'm ready to share my story and tell people kind of my experience, and hopefully through my experience, so hopefully you won't have to go through what I've been through, but you can glean some things from my own experience that may help shape your life in some way, shape, or form.
Well, and I'm going to have all of Shane's links and everything below. But guys, if they want to follow you, if they want to be part of your journey, where do they go?
Yes, go to my Instagram at Shane Baldwin _ I think I have 1,000 total followers right now.
Beginning of March 2023. Let's see how it grows.
Yes, but literally, my goal is every day I'm going to find one person and I'm going to ask them to follow me. I post daily. I have somebody who manages my social media. I try and post content that can hopefully be relevant and helpful as you figure out your divine purpose on this earth.
Huge. Okay, guys, so go follow his Instagram. That's the main spot, and then you'll find any links there. So last question for Shane that I want to bring up is, if everybody in the world was going to see this, if everybody on earth saw this podcast, what's the one message that you would want them to hear?
If we all believe that we are children of a higher power, then we have all inherited their DNA. And what do we believe about the higher source? All powerful, knowledgeable, omniscient, omnipresent, all of these amazing things. And that DNA exists within each one of us. And so each one of us have such amazing potential and ability if we'll just take for a second to figure out who we are and why we're here and start asking real questions about our purpose. I think there's some statement that God said, "This is my work and my glory to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man." And that should be each one of our missions. If that's his mission, then it should be our mission to do the same, not just for us, but for those around us.
Huge. Thanks, Shane. So glad you're on. We're going to get him back on, guys. Go follow him, please. Get on this train. Get out of, wherever you've been and start that growth. Get on the path. Start following and talking with, your divine creator, and recognize that divinity in yourself, because it's there.
Thanks, Mikey. Appreciate it.